Underneath the commotion of the greatest assembly of seabirds in the northeast Atlantic, St Kilda's ranger is clinging to a cliff, searching for a bird in trouble. Visitors that brave the journey to the remote and precipitous islands of St Kilda encounter the unforgettable spectacle of thousands of breeding seabirds, speciality species, and the archaeological remnants of a resolute culture. This Galapagos of the North is celebrating its 30th anniversary as a Natural World Heritage Site. However, within these 3 decades, St Kilda has experienced a rapid transformation. An ecosystem unravelling, facing changes that could take it beyond recognition. "41 miles west of the Outer Hebrides, St Kilda is an archipelago of isolated islands and towering sea stacks. Draped over this dramatic natural backdrop is a relict cultural landscape, tended to each summer by volunteers. In 1930, the seabird-consuming people who built this village permanently evacuated. What remains is a testament to humans living sustainably within extreme conditions. The islanders' structures have since been repurposed by St Kilda's resilient wildlife. Isolation is a natural laboratory, speeding up change, resulting in the evolution of distinct animals. The St Kilda field mouse is twice the size of its mainland counterpart, and the super-sized St Kilda wren even has its own unique song. Scientists are still uncovering more, such as this colourful dandelion, perhaps overlooked due to the multitude of other distractions. Completely dissimilar to their fluffy cousins, soy sheep are primitive, intelligent and wild. Although trapped on small exposed islands, St Kilda's resident fauna continues to thrive despite a reduction in resources after the St Kildan's evacuation. However, in contrast, the future for St Kilda's summer migrants has become a cliffhanger. As the conservation guardians of these islands, the National Trust for Scotland focus a lot of attention on long-term seabird monitoring. Seabird and marine ranger Gina reaches down a puffin burrow and waits for a puffin to nibble on her finger. Active burrows are marked with a carefully inserted cane. Once 100 active burrows have been marked, Gina will return later on in the year to count the puffin's breeding success. Studies on seabird population dynamics are indicating that after a century of growth, seabird populations are now rapidly crashing. We are witnessing the decline of the Atlantic's most significant seabird sanctuary. In 1967, Christopher Milne directed and produced The Lonely Islands, one of the most widely acclaimed films ever made about St Kilda.
So the separate world of the seabirds seems to go on thriving. The dressy razorbills are primitive birds and relations of the extinct great auks once found in St Kilda. Here they gather for an afternoon's conversation.
For first-time visitors, the sheer magnitude of St Kilda's seabird flocks is breathtaking. But what Christopher Milne filmed only a few decades ago was on another level. Since Milne's film, the breeding populations of fulmars, guillemots, razorbills and puffins have plummeted. And kittiwakes, statistically speaking, are now all but extinct on St Kilda.
It would be a great shame if our grandchildren can no longer hear that sound in the future.
Dr. Richard Luxmoor is the National Trust for Scotland's Senior Nature Conservation Advisor.
To me, the cry of the kittiwake is the quintessential sound of the coast. I associate it with childhood visits to the seaside. Populations of kittiwakes are plummeting all around Scotland, and nowhere more so than on St Kilda, where we've lost over 90% of the colony in the last 30 years. Seabirds are essentially part of the marine ecosystem. Although they breed on land, they spend most of their life out at sea, and they can tell us an awful lot about its state of health. In the last 30 years, the plankton communities have shifted northwards by 1,000 kilometres. That's more than the distance from Edinburgh to Paris. And it's having huge impacts on the animals that depend on it. If we had vegetation communities on land that had been shifting by a similar distance, there would be pandemonium, there would be questions in Parliament. But because it's happening in the sea, we tend not to notice it's happening. It crept up on us gradually.
Although most of St Kilda's seabird populations are in decline, one has seen a dramatic rise. The great skua, or bonxie, used to be very rare in Scotland and was confined to the Shetland Islands. It is phenomenal to think that until recently there weren't any on St Kilda. And now there are over 200 breeding pairs. Bonxies are pirates. They mostly depend on stealing fish from other seabirds as they return to their chicks. But they are also predators with a very wide diet. Their direct predation of another seabird is proving very challenging for conservationists. This rare seabird is rapidly eating its way through another rare seabird. At the dead of night, even way out in the Atlantic Ocean, suddenly everything can come to life. This unnerving territorial call belongs to the Leach's storm petrel. They are the smallest European seabird, and up to 94% of their population come to St Kilda to breed. Their tiny stature has enabled them to adapt the St Kildan structures into nesting tower blocks. But although they are nimble and agile on the wing, they are calamitous on 2 feet. So they only return to their burrows at night to escape predation from birds such as skuas.
Back in the 1990s, a scientist was doing some work on St Kilda, estimated that they were eating up to 15,000 individual Leach's storm petrels every year. And we were very concerned about the implications of this research. I mean, to be honest, we didn't believe it. So we put a research student onto the island for 3 years to specifically look at the issue of bonxie predation on Leach's storm petrels. And the results of his research were even more worrying than we had originally thought. Far from killing 15,000 leechy storm petrels a year, he calculated that in some years they were killing over 20,000 a year, 25,000 leechy storm petrels in each year.
To learn how they can help protect the petrels, the National Trust for Scotland has been keeping a close eye on the skua's annexation of St Kilda. Anyone who has encountered skuas will tell you one thing: if you unwittingly walk near their nest, they will certainly let you know. Being dive-bombed by a menacing, carnivorous, overweight chicken is a danger St Kilda's ranger is all too aware of. But she must march on if we are to understand what has been driving this population's growth. It is believed that the skua's range increased because of both the cessation of human persecution and readily available fish being discarded from trawlers. The great skua's smaller cousins, Arctic skuas, have also been tempted over, although currently this population has remained at only 2 breeding pairs. Recently enforced changes in fisheries management will perhaps cause the skua population to recede. But these seabird population studies are vital because these species are extremely long-lived and changes are often not apparent for several years. Despite its hazards, long-term monitoring of skua nests is relatively straightforward. However, little is known about the breeding behaviour of Leach's storm petrels. Petrels are excruciatingly skittish and nest deep within a narrow labyrinth of crevices and tunnels. So the National Trust for Scotland decided to call in the help of a contractor.
I've built many houses in my time, but I've never built a house for a bird.
Artificial nests are commonly used to monitor breeding birds. But even for Stephen MacDonald, a highly experienced building contractor, designing a house for petrels was a massive challenge.
When I was asked if I could think of an idea that the boxes should be constructed of, it's very important that I took into consideration the weather that we have out here in St Kilda. Extremely fierce, ferocious winds, heavy rainfall. So the material that we had to use had to be suitable for purpose. It was important that the box obviously could be open, but without fear of the bird being alarmed by any inrush of air. So I devised a sliding mechanism of a perspex sliding lid and a lid above that, so the lid could be opened and the bird could be observed via the perspex window. It was very important in my mind that the boxes when they were in place did not look out of place with their surroundings. I love this island dearly, and to contribute in this fashion, I'm extremely proud.
Seabirds can tell us a lot about the state of health of the marine ecosystem, and the message they're bringing back to us is extremely worrying. The base of the marine food chain is tiny floating animals in the plankton, and we used to think that because of their mobility they were quite immune to climate change. But we now realise that that's actually the core of the problem. Coupled with the shift in range, a lot of the plankton has actually decreased in abundance as well by some 70%. And it's not surprising that the seabirds that depend on this have been left high and dry, and they are unable to cope with the staggering rate of climate change that we're experiencing. The inhabitants of St Kilda, before they left, used to depend on seabird colonies for their food, and they did it in a sustainable way. They used to husband the seabird colonies very carefully. And if they were to come back now, 70 years after their evacuation, and see the cliffs that were once teeming with seabirds now almost empty, they would be horrified to see what has happened on the island that they once lived on.